I've lived my whole life in this city. I was born here. I witnessed the 1984 anti-Sikh massacre. I don't use the term riot consciously. I think riot is a misnomer to describe these situations, whether it was 84 or 2020 or 2002, etc. From what I saw firsthand, including the conduct, I was an undergrad student at that time, including response of different police, etc., haunted me so much that much later I actually undertook one of the earliest legal researches on examining communal violence by picking up 100 plus judgments of 1984, largely murder cases of trial courts, examined them to see why did most cases result in acquittal, and that shaped my understanding to a large extent. Apart from then the subsequent events that followed, and I also studied all the commissions of inquiries, the committee reports, and I would have to disagree therefore based on that material, not a personal inclination, that I'm not sure that the statement of Delhi Police's professionalism would be borne out by reports authored by, say, the Kusum Lata Mittal committee report, authored by a former bureaucrat, in which he actually recommended that some of the senior police officers need to be dismissed from service without inquiry, a provision available under the Constitution. Of course, none of that ever happened. And I personally filed an affidavit before a subsequent commission of inquiry when the Congress was not in power, and a new commission of inquiry, not the Ranganath Mishra Commission, was set up examining the role of the police, and there is actually very damning material available from committee reports authored by bureaucrats as well as judgments authored obviously by judges. So there is material to show that there has been a concern, and that concern has only grown, and much of it was discussed in the earlier panel, so I will not repeat that, except to bring us to how do we look at it. I don't think this can be examined as individual policemen being good, indifferent, unkind, inhumane, brutal, violent. I think those are all unnecessary and unhelpful categories to understand what is shaping all this. And it's something that I'm saying on the basis of work done not just in 84, the Hashimpura case, Kandhamal, anti-Christian violence, etc., which shows that there is what in this country we have refused to acknowledge, and Mr. Mujahat Sahab would bear me out, something that I've said only innumerable times, as a proposition, not as a final declaration of anything. I at least believe that we have to have evidence and material to examine any proposition, but a proposition that is there institutional bias in the police force, in the law enforcement, in the investigating agencies. We have shied away from even examining that proposition. It's something that in the UK was put forward after the killing of Stephen Lawrence by Lord Macpherson about what is institutional bias, when an entire organization as a collective works through prejudices, etc. So there are models which are helpful in examining a certain situation. In this country, we have shied away, and we have shied away through different regimes for various expedient reasons of which are political, which perhaps are necessary for those regimes at that time. But why have we as a citizenry shied away from examining this, coming up with material, coming up with data? And I will link this kind of material and data analysis as to what shapes not only our understanding, but what Justice Shah referred to as how does the court form an understanding of what is happening in society today. I personally think that in this country, independence of judiciary has led to insulation from reality, but that's a different subject for another day. But what shapes our understanding cannot be that these police officers, one is, of course, there is a direct political interference and a political diktat that is given. The second is a matter of institutional bias, particularly against religious minorities, something that is and has been there against Dalits and other marginalized groups, but something we don't examine as a subject. And I would urge that we look through that lens, and we would find rather grim concerns that may emerge. The other aspect, I would say, with respect to policing in particular, there's a lot of debate, separate investigation from law and order. I have no dispute with that. I'm not sure it will resolve everything. It may address certain things. It won't resolve anything. We often hear nowadays, and it's become commonplace, where we talk about a special investigating team, an SIT. It's not something that figures in the Indian law. It's something that the courts came up with to address precisely these concerns that they are not being able to rely upon the regular policing and the police force. So the courts invented a legal device of a special investigating team. The number of times nowadays that people ask for a special investigating team is actually something that should be, just data points should be built on it, because there seems to be a general lack of faith in an investigation to be done by the police wherever there is any power inequivalence. And here we are talking of a crime in which the state obviously has both an interest and a hand. The second point I want to go to here is, before I finish that, this morning I was reading the affidavit filed in something that came out only a couple of days ago before the Gujarat High Court, in which Muslim men had been flogged in October of 2022 because there had been stone pelting allegedly where a Navratri celebration was taking place in some district in Gujarat, and the police had come there. They had picked up various people, and then they tied some of the Muslim men to a pole and they flogged them, and that affidavit actually says it was done in the interest of maintaining peace and harmony. It's an affidavit filed in a court of law by the police. The police is given powers to maintain law and order and show peace and harmony is an even greater cause actually. So that is where we are in how the police is understanding and thinking and the impunity with which it is operating. I have been doing the case of what was referred to earlier in the first panel, the case of Faizan, the young man who was one of the 5 men picked up, beaten by the police, asked to sing the national anthem while they are lying completely bludgeoned and wounded, and then kept overnight in extremely critical condition in the police station. And the police has on record before the Delhi High Court, where we've asked for a special investigating team, they have on record there said that we kept him here to safeguard him from the rioting that was taking place outside. So in the middle of the February 2020 violence, Muslim men asked the police to keep them in the police station. All right, let's take it as maybe it did happen. But here is a young man who has very critical injuries. He dies within 48 hours, within 36 hours of being released. You didn't take him to the hospital. So you took him into protective custody. You didn't give him any medical treatment. You eventually released him and it was pretty apparent he's going to die. And you didn't want a custodial death inside the police station. That petition has been pending ever since. We are in 2023. Status reports not worth the paper they are written on continue to be filed. And the special unit set up by the Delhi police to examine the riot cases is searching for those policemen using all manner of technology, we are told, but they have not been able to identify anyone who has done this. I am not persuaded that it was inadequacy of the police force. I am not persuaded that there were not enough police. It's actually available on camera, including that video, and that's the only reason why there's a case, otherwise who would have believed anything. I think the problem runs deeper. Putting more boots on the streets at that time, would it have saved more lives, more property? I am not convinced. So we'll have to deal with a situation which is way more difficult and will not be resolved through administrative answers to what we are reckoning with, and therefore perhaps some of us, very much like Hartosh, go back to the past to find the answers to the present. The second thing I would want to speak about is that the foundation of the criminal justice system rests on an assumption that the state is going to be impartial. Everybody can think for themselves. If the state is going to act in a partisan manner, and I say this with full responsibility, happy to give enough illustrations for it to be nightfall here. If the state is not going to be partisan, your criminal justice system actually stands inverted and disrupted. It will not function in the manner it is assumed. It is a colonial way. I'm not saying discard the Indian Penal Code, please. I do not know what the MHA is cooking up in amendments. That is not at all what I'm hinting at. But your criminal legal system is assuming the state will be impartial and will prosecute, and all agencies of the state, the prosecutor, the law enforcement agency, is going to act without bias, without partisan. It isn't happening. In these kinds of cases, there is a direct political interest. And when that is happening, to be surprised or shocked at the answers that come from the court, therefore, and I'll come to the court separately, is something that we need to reimagine, we need to re-envision why the criminal justice system will deliver. When we talk of accountability and we say, and I've heard this from many very capable, admirable bureaucrats like Mr. Pillai, Harsh has said this on many occasions, that a riot can be controlled, but it isn't. And when it isn't, there are no consequences for that district magistrate, for that collector, except a transfer. A transfer is not a consequence. There is no accountability written into the criminal law of a bureaucrat. And Mr. Pillai would recall efforts made to bring in an anti-communal violence law, the kernel of which and at the heart of which stood accountability of civil servants to stop and prevent the violence. No regime wants to turn law into being democratic. Criminal law has been shaped by a colonial vision and continues like that without challenge. Because where is the accountability? And I've said this on many occasions. Please pick up the Indian Penal Code. The smallest chapter in the Indian Penal Code, even today, and it keeps getting amended all the time, is offences by the state. Open the newspaper and please see who is committing the largest number of offences today. Your law is not in alignment with the truth of your democracy. And that is where I think particularly those who have worked within the system need to reflect on where those fundamental foundational changes need to be brought about. I will lastly, just two small points here. One is on hate speech. Much has been said in the first panel and I will not repeat any of that, except to say there are two concerns. One, of course, there's been a long debate in civil society also whether hate speech should be criminalized, whether the direct and close proximity to violence, etc., etc. I have a more fundamental question which I would not have asked a few years ago. I do think this is a different time. I don't agree that the police has changed very much from 84 to now, but I do think this is a different time. Professor Zoya Hassan is sitting here. She has always, I remember a phrase she used once about how what for the Congress regime is pragmatic is programmatic. Communalism is programmatic for the BJP and others. And I think that's a helpful way of understanding.